Well, thank you, Chamberlain. I have joining me now Professor Bolaji Owasanoye, who is the Secretary, Presidential Advisory Committee on Anti-Corruption. You're welcome to Sunrise Daily.
Thank you for inviting me. Good morning.
Good morning. Well, we've been showing our viewers just before you came into our studios some of the challenges at the IDP camps. And then the last one, we saw the effect that, should we say, alleged corruption could have on even the lives of internally displaced persons, as seen in the video in I think it's Cross River now, especially with the Bakassi IDPs who materials were earmarked for, but the materials just never got to them. Okay. But looking at the work that, the Presidential Advisory Committee has been doing, and, only recently the conference that happened in Abuja was 2 days ago, now the focus is on the banks. How come before now we never really thought about the role that the banks should be playing in terms of helping with the fight against corruption?
Well, the truth of the matter is that there had never been the will and the determination to unpack this whole saga of corruption. And this administration, as you know, has made the focus on corruption one of the cardinal things. And so it's been one of the things that we've focused on, to look not only at direct looting of public assets by politically exposed persons and those who have the opportunity to do so, but to look at what also happens through the private sector and other players. Now, you can't move big money except the banks help you. You can't hide it in the books except the accountants and auditors help you. You can't create shell companies except the lawyers help you. Okay? You cannot divert the money into some grandiose, false projects except the real estate guys help you. So right now we're beginning to unpack the whole thing. And we're saying that whichever way you look at it, these guys, if they are not principal actors, they are accessories before or after the fact. They know that something is fundamentally going on. And contrary to their own rules, both professional ethics rules and extant laws of the land, they continue to violate. Now, in recent times, we've heard of banks holding stolen funds in suspense accounts, banks holding funds and helping customers to disburse for illegal activities. We've seen all that happening. We've seen banks holding funds for MDAs that government had said all those funds should be transferred, like TSA, to CBN. They knew that these funds are held by MDAs, okay? So they illegally hold those funds. Now we're saying that that should no longer be the case. Now, in fairness, there's been some argument that it's not the banks that are complicit, but the staff of the bank. But I don't think that they can ignore or escape some level of corporate liability, because the management oftentimes would know. And if that were not the case, we would have loved to see banks banks sanctioning their own in a way that at least builds the confidence, not just of the government, of the public, that the banks are not colluding. But this is coming from the highest level. You are not seeing lower, you are not seeing ordinary staff, the tellers. You are seeing people who are linked with or within management doing this. They know about it. So it's time to begin to unpack this whole thing and to focus on the role that banks are playing in this whole thing called corruption.
It's very interesting in a situation where we know that banks are always looking for money. We know the marketing strategy of many banks and how they constantly look for how their members of staff can bring in cash. Isn't this a tall order?
Well, it's one of the challenges within the system. I mean, I will admit that even amongst them, they have tried to diminish the negative effect of those orders. You just tell your so-called marketing staff within a month they must bring in $1 billion. What are they going to do to get that $1 billion? It's led to all manner of abuse, and it's led to, of course, exploitation of the women, especially. Now, I am aware that within the banking sector, they have been trying to discourage that. So there's a little bit less pressure to do that. But there are other things that they have introduced that have also sort of created dysfunction within the system. This crave for rather doing proper retail banking, okay, trying to bring in all those little cash that people hide under the pillows, but looking for the big kill through politically exposed persons or public institutions. So that's why many people have complained that Nigerian banks are really not doing banking, because they are really not getting at the people they ought to get at.
Well, we'll have to take a moment at this point. We will come back and focus a bit more on this conversation in just a moment. Stay with us. Professor Bolaji Owasanoye is still with us in the studio, and we're talking about the fight against corruption. This time around, from that report, you saw that the focus is now, or seems to be, on the banks, as it were. But your committee is to advise government in terms of strategies on fighting corruption. So what precisely are you asking government to do now in terms of, what you've noticed with, the situation in the banks?
Well, it's not just, I should say that we're focusing on all middlemen. In other words, all those who facilitate and make corruption happen and succeed. Now, I need to say that you need to separate direct looting of public assets by politically exposed persons, like you just dip your hands into the cookie jar and take out what you want, and those who create complex transactions through commercial trading, okay, like big companies, okay, who then export capital illegally, what we call illicit financial flows, either by over-invoicing things that they import or under-invoicing things they export, by shifting profit, by evading tax. Nobody can do it unless some expert helps you to do it. So what we're saying now is that in addition to focusing on, quote and unquote, the principal actor, we need to focus on the middlemen who have made it happen. Interestingly, for all the key professionals or the professions that are able to facilitate corruption and illicit financial flows, their rules of professional ethics forbid it. Bankers don't condone their own doing what we're talking about. Accountants don't condone their own doing what we're talking about. The legal profession don't condone their own doing what we're talking about. But all along, we had focused on the person who stole the money, but we never looked and all those who helped them. So we're just saying this is a chain. It's organized criminality. It is forbidden by law. We should begin to treat it as such.
So what specifically are you asking government to do?
First, we're calling attention to this publicly now. We would prefer that corrective measures be taken internally. It's always better when you don't allow external stimulus to force you to make changes. You can do it from inside. You can do it well at your pace. You can avoid the negative effect and, of course, the negative consequences. But if you allow the push to come from outside, it never goes the way that you want.
Did you get to speak with the bankers, though? I mean, the middlemen. You talked about bankers, lawyers. I know the bankers, more specifically, are very conservative and would not really want to be dragged into the limelight. But have you been able to speak to them to say, gentlemen or ladies, these are the challenges that we're facing, with your institution, and we think that you should be able to do something about it?
First of all, since last year, when we started our work, with the Association of Professional Bodies, with the CIBN, we've engaged with them through their leadership to say, these are the things we're saying. It will be helpful that internally you take corrective measures. Now, I must admit that even within the banks, they have compliance officers whose job is to make sure that this sort of thing does not happen. And in fairness to them, they are trying their best. But of course, there are always those bad eggs and, within the pack that you need to isolate. And you need to isolate very quickly. So we've been engaging with them. This conference that we're having, which ends today, bankers are there, very well represented. We give them a platform to make their voice heard, to say what they are doing. Later on this month, we're also engaging with them to say, look, we know from our engagement that some of you, and we believe the majority of you, do not like what is happening. But the very few who succeed, they succeed big time. And this is leading to huge outflows. So we've got to stop it. Now, in the area of commercial transactions, for example, what is going out is far more than what is directly looted. We're looking at over 60% of capital outflows that we're losing. Okay? It won't happen if we have your cooperation. In the trade sector, you have groups like customs as well. We're engaging with everybody and saying, you take corrective measures. This is not about embarrassing or bringing anybody down. You can do corrective measures better than government probably can, but if you would not do it, government has no choice.
Because looking at some of the friction that has been created, I mean, I'm sure you're definitely not looking for friction. What you're looking for is success in the fight against corruption. Yes. But there's